My life at Sterling Corporation was a finely tuned clock. For 30 years, I had been the steady pendulum in its recruitment department, the hand that moved surely from minute to minute, ensuring the right talent found its way into the right slots. 30 years. From a fresh-faced grad with an eager handshake to the grizzled veteran whose name was synonymous with a good fit in the company's hiring philosophy. I was the head of recruitment, a middle manager with a comfortable office, a solid team, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your job inside and out. Retirement was on the horizon, a golden sunset I had been planning for, meticulously saving, dreaming of days filled with golf, gardening, and finally getting around to fixing that leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. Sterling Corporation wasn't just a workplace, it was a second home. I had seen generations of employees pass through its doors, recruited many of them myself. I knew their stories, their aspirations, their quiet triumphs and struggles. Loyalty, respect, and a sense of family, these were the values I believed we upheld. And I, David, had embodied them. Then came Alex Sterling Jr. The Jr. was important. He wasn't old man Sterling, who had built this company from the ground up with grit and a handshake. Alex Jr. was fresh out of an MBA program, a shark in a bespoke suit, with a portfolio of buzzwords and a laser focus on synergy, lean operations, and disruptive innovation. He took over as CEO a year ago, and the air in the executive suites had thickened with a new kind of ambition, colder, more distant. Old man Sterling used to walk the floors, new names. Alex Jr. communicated via polished internal memos and quarterly video addresses. The summons came on a Tuesday. A crisp email from his assistant, CEO Sterling requests your presence in his office, 3 p.m. today. No topic. No pleasantries. Just the kind of terse formality that always preceded unwelcome news for someone. I felt a flicker of unease, but dismissed it. Perhaps a new initiative for the recruitment department? A review of my retirement plans? I squared my shoulders, adjusted my tie, and walked the familiar corridor to the executive floor. His office was minimalist, all glass and sharp angles, unlike old man Sterling's warm, wood-paneled sanctuary. Alex Jr. sat behind a vast, empty desk, framed by the city skyline. He didn't stand. He didn't offer a handshake. He just looked up, his eyes cold and assessing. David, he began, his voice devoid of inflection. Thank you for coming. I nodded, waiting. My stomach tightened. We're moving in a new direction, he continued, a practiced cadence. Streamlining operations. Reducing overhead. Focusing on a more agile workforce. I still didn't understand. Recruitment was essential for an agile workforce. As part of this necessary restructuring, he went on, we've made the difficult decision to eliminate your position, effective immediately. The words hit me like a physical blow, a cold, hard punch to the chest. Eliminate my position? My position? Head of recruitment? 30 years? Retirement around the corner? Effective immediately? I managed to croak, the words barely forming. He nodded, looking at me like I was a particularly dull spreadsheet. Yes. Human Resources will handle your severance package and outplacement services. You have 30 minutes to pack your personal belongings from your office. Security will escort you out. 30 minutes. 30 years. 30 seconds to pack my box. The hook wasn't hyperbole, it was terrifyingly real. I stared at him, waiting for more. An explanation. A thank you. A recognition of the decades I'd poured into this company. But his expression was blank. Impassive. He saw a line item, a cost to be cut, not a loyal employee whose life was being dismantled. Understood, I heard myself say, the word flat, hollow, pulled from some deep, unfamiliar place inside me. It was the only thing I could say that didn't feel like begging, or rage, or crumbling. It was a quiet acknowledgement of a brutal, undeniable reality. He nodded, already looking past me, picking up a tablet. HR will be in touch. The dismissal was complete. I walked out of his office in a daze. The corridor, once familiar, felt alien, cold. My office, filled with framed photos of my wife, drawings from my grandkids, and plaques of appreciation, now seemed like a stranger's space. I packed mechanically, hands trembling slightly as I gathered the small pieces of my life, a favorite coffee mug, a worn leather desk pad, a framed photo of my team from last year's Christmas party. Each item felt heavier than it should, laden with the weight of shattered loyalty. Leaving was surreal. I mumbled a few goodbyes to the startled faces of colleagues who saw me carrying a small box, a security guard hovering discreetly nearby. Their eyes were wide, full of a mixture of shock, sympathy, and a naked, desperate fear. My dismissal was a clear message: no one was safe. Loyalty meant nothing. I called my wife, Sarah, from the car. "I've been let go," I said, the words catching in my throat. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Then, "David? What are you talking about? Let go? After all these years?" Her voice cracked with disbelief, then anger. That son of a... I listened to her fury, the raw emotion a stark contrast to the sterile dismissal I'd just endured. Her anger was a comfort, a validation of the profound injustice. I felt numb, a hollow ache where my future plans used to be. Retirement, a golden sunset, had just been replaced by a sudden, terrifying precipice. The first few days were a blur of disorientation. I'd wake up at the usual time, the muscle memory pulling me towards the morning routine, only to remember I was unemployed. 30 years. Just like that. The corporate ruthlessness was a bitter pill, hard to swallow. I had always believed in the company, believed my loyalty was valued. It was a naive belief, shattered in 30 seconds. Calls started coming in. From former colleagues, hushed, sympathetic. "David, I can't believe it. How could they do that?" They were genuinely upset, but also clearly afraid. Their own jobs now felt precarious. They spoke of low morale spreading through the company like a virus. I could hear the fear in their voices, the guarded nature of their words. They wanted to express solidarity, but without risking their own livelihoods. I didn't badmouth Alex Jr. or the company. What was there to say? The act itself spoke volumes. My quiet dignity, born of shock and disbelief, was my only armor. But a seed had been planted. A seed of injustice, watered by the fear of my former colleagues, and nourished by the profound sense of betrayal. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about what this firing represented. A callous disregard for human value, a brutal display of power, a betrayal of the unspoken contract between employer and employee. This wasn't just my reckoning. It was the company's. And Alex Jr.'s. I had packed my box in 30 seconds. But the consequences of those 30 seconds were just beginning to unfold. And I had a feeling, a quiet certainty, that they were going to be far more impactful than anyone at Sterling Corp., especially Alex Jr., could ever imagine. The news of my dismissal spread through Sterling Corp. Faster than any internal memo. I didn't have to be there to know it. The calls from former colleagues grew more frequent, their initial shock giving way to a simmering anger. "It's just wrong, David," one senior manager, a man I'd personally recruited 20 years ago, told me. "After all you've done for this place." He was a good man, but also a scared one. I knew he wouldn't risk his own neck by speaking out. But discontent has its own ways of finding a voice. I suspected it was a collective frustration, not a single whistleblower, that ultimately pricked the ears of the local news. The company had been quietly laying off other long-serving employees in different departments over the past few months, each dismissal cushioned by platitudes of restructuring, but keenly felt as a chilling harbinger. My abrupt, final dismissal, coming just shy of my retirement, must have been the final straw for someone. Or several someones. The first indication that the story had leaked came in a voicemail. A reporter from the Daily Chronicle, our local paper, introducing herself as Sarah Jenkins. She had heard about my recent departure from Sterling Corp and was curious to learn more. She left her contact information, her tone professional but insistent. My stomach clenched. I hadn't sought this. I hadn't gone looking for trouble. But the truth, when it's suppressed, has a way of surfacing. My first instinct was to ignore it. To just disappear quietly into my unintended early retirement. But then I thought of Alex Jr.'s cold, dismissive eyes, the way he saw me as a mere number. I thought of the fear in my former colleagues' voices. And I thought of the principle of it all, the crushing of loyalty for the sake of a lean image. "What are you going to do, David?" Sarah asked, her voice full of concern. "Talk to them?" I looked out at our backyard, meticulously tended, a world away from the glass towers of Sterling Corporation. "I need to think," I told her. It wasn't about revenge. It was about dignity. About setting the record straight. And maybe, just maybe, reminding them that people weren't just balance sheet items. I called Sarah Jenkins back. I was careful, measured. I didn't badmouth the company or the CEO. I spoke only of facts, my 30 years of service, my role, my impending retirement, and the abrupt, 30-second conversation that ended it all. I described the impact on my team, the sense of uncertainty now pervading the recruitment department. I didn't need to embellish. The truth, presented calmly, was damning enough. "Did they offer you a reason?" she asked, her pen scratching on paper. "Cost-cutting. Restructuring. Streamlining," I repeated the buzzwords. "They're moving in a new direction." I let the irony hang in the air. "And how do you feel about that, Mr. Davies?" she prompted gently. I paused, choosing my words carefully. 30 years is a long time to build something, I said, my voice low. You invest yourself. Your expertise. Your loyalty. You believe you're part of a family, part of something that values its people. To be discarded so swiftly, so impersonally, it's a stark reminder that sometimes, in corporate America, loyalty is a one-way street. I gave her no sound bites of anger, no tearful lament. Just the quiet, understated truth of a man who had been wronged. That was my power. My integrity, my decades of reputation, spoke for themselves. The story broke 2 days later. Front page of the local section, Sterling Corp axes long-serving recruiter days before retirement. My name was there, alongside a small, unflattering photo of Alex Sterling Jr. The article was well-researched, quoting anonymous sources within the company who corroborated the low morale and the pattern of recent layoffs. It highlighted my 3 decades of service, my reputation in the local business community as a respected recruiter, and the seemingly callous timing of my dismissal. It wasn't a screaming exposé of fraud, but a quiet, devastating indictment of corporate values. The public backlash was immediate and fierce. The comments section of the Daily Chronicle website exploded. Shame on Sterling Corp. 30 years and they do this? Disgusting. I was considering working for them, but not anymore. If they treat their own like that, forget it. Social media lit up. Local community groups, often quick to rally around perceived injustice, shared the story widely. My name, David Davies, the quiet recruiter, became a rallying cry against corporate ruthlessness. The anger wasn't just about my specific case, it tapped into a broader frustration many people felt about corporate loyalty being a relic of the past. It resonated with the fear of expendability, the feeling that years of dedication could be erased in a moment by a cold, bottom-line decision. Alex Jr.'s lean image, which he so desperately wanted to project, was instead being perceived as heartless. I watched it unfold from the quiet solitude of my home. It felt like a wildfire I hadn't lit, but merely described to a reporter. The news didn't just report it, the public owned it. The phone calls to Sarah Jenkins from other media outlets started almost immediately, local TV stations, radio shows, even some national business news desks interested in the human cost of corporate restructuring. She managed them, shielding me, allowing me to remain mostly out of the direct spotlight, letting the story speak for itself. My one understated statement had been enough. Sterling Corporation began to feel the heat. Their social media channels, usually filled with self-congratulatory posts about corporate responsibility, were now flooded with condemnation. Their carefully cultivated public image was crumbling. Alex Jr.'s ambition to project a lean, modern company was backfiring spectacularly, instead painting Sterling Corp as a cold, unfeeling machine. I didn't gloat. I felt no triumph, only a grim satisfaction. It wasn't about getting revenge. It was about the truth, quietly told, having its own profound consequence. They wanted to be lean, but they were bleeding talent, morale, and their reputation. And Alex Jr., in his ambition, was suddenly finding himself in a reckoning far larger than he could have possibly foreseen. The public backlash against Sterling Corp wasn't a fleeting storm. It was a persistent, eroding tide. Alex Jr.'s carefully constructed image of a visionary, modern CEO quickly morphed into that of a ruthless, soulless corporate climber. The comment sections online, the angry calls to the local news, the disgusted murmurs from the community, they all fed into the same powerful narrative: Sterling Corp didn't care about its people. I watched it unfold from the quiet remove of my living room. Sarah kept me updated, pointing out new articles, new scathing social media posts. There was a quiet satisfaction in seeing the truth, simply stated, have such a profound impact. But beneath that satisfaction was a deeper sense of sadness. This was the company I had poured my life into, now being publicly dragged through the mud. The tangible impact on Sterling Corp quickly became undeniable. Morale within the company, already bruised by previous layoffs, plummeted. The atmosphere, as described by the occasional hushed phone call from a former colleague, was toxic. People came to work, did their jobs, but the spirit, the loyalty, the sense of being part of a team, all were gone. The fear of being next was palpable. But it wasn't just fear that was driving people out. It was disgust. The irony was bitter. Alex Jr. wanted a lean workforce, and he was getting one, but not in the way he intended. The talent exodus began subtly, then picked up speed. Good people, managers I had hired and mentored, seasoned professionals who knew the company's core operations inside and out, started leaving. Not for better offers necessarily, but for any offer that promised a shred of dignity or a less hostile environment. Remember Mark? Sarah asked me one evening, pointing to an article on her tablet. Mark, a brilliant young engineer I had recruited 5 years ago, whose potential I had championed. He had just resigned. He's going to a startup. Said he couldn't work for a company that treated its people like disposable assets. Mark wasn't the only one. Names I recognized from various departments appeared in LinkedIn updates, announcing new opportunities. Each notification was a small, quiet testament to the damage Alex Jr. had wrought. The very people who formed the backbone of Sterling Corp's innovation and efficiency were walking out the door. And then there was the recruitment pipeline. The irony was almost poetic. The department I had built, the very mechanism by which the company replenished its talent, was now a wasteland. Potential candidates, those who had been impressed by Sterling Corp's once stellar reputation, were now actively shunning them. Universities, with whom we had built decades-long relationships for graduate recruitment, began subtly pushing their students towards other companies. Industry conferences, once fertile hunting grounds for top talent, became places where Sterling Corp's recruiters were eyed with suspicion, their booths largely empty. "It's bad," David, a former colleague, still in HR, confided in a hushed phone call. "Candidates are pulling out of interviews. Offers are being declined. We can't fill critical roles. The lean image is proving to be unsustainable when you don't have anyone left to do the work. Alex Jr.'s response was a masterclass in failing crisis management. He issued internal memos, then a public statement, full of corporate boilerplate about unfortunate misunderstandings and our commitment to our people. It rang hollow. He tried to spin the narrative on financial news shows, emphasizing the importance of tough decisions for long-term growth. But his words were drowned out by the deafening chorus of public outrage and the increasingly evident internal chaos. His attempts to project strength only highlighted his disconnect. He was a CEO who understood numbers but seemed utterly baffled by people. There was a brief, pathetic attempt to discredit me. A leak, seemingly from inside Sterling Corp's PR department, suggested I was a disgruntled employee with a history of minor complaints. It was a desperate, clumsy move that backfired spectacularly. Sarah Jenkins, the reporter, quickly debunked it, citing my impeccable record and numerous awards during my tenure. The attempt to smear me only served to deepen public sympathy and reinforce the narrative of a ruthless corporation trying to silence the truth. The pressure on Alex Jr. became immense. The board of directors, usually a rubber stamp, began to stir. Investors, spooked by the plummeting stock price and the talent drain, demanded answers. His image, once his greatest asset, was now his biggest liability. He had achieved his lean vision, but he had done so by stripping the company of its soul and its future. I heard it on the evening news. Not from the Daily Chronicle, but from a national business channel. The headline flashed across the bottom of the screen. Sterling Corp CEO Alex Sterling Jr. resigns amidst public outcry and talent exodus. I felt no surge of triumph. Only a quiet, profound sense of resolution. It wasn't a victory dance. It was more like watching a slow-motion train wreck reach its inevitable conclusion. The company I had loved, built, and believed in for 30 years had been grievously wounded. Alex Jr. had lost his position, his ambition crashing down around him. He had chosen ruthlessness over loyalty, and it had cost him everything. For me, the resolution was different. The phone rang a week later. It was the chairman of Sterling Corp's board, a stern, old-school man I knew from company functions. He expressed profound regret for my treatment, acknowledged the missteps made by the previous leadership, and offered me a formal apology. He even extended an offer, a consultancy role, advising a newly formed Employee Relations and Culture Committee on how to rebuild trust and morale within the company. I considered it. The thought of going back, even in a different capacity, was strange. The company was scarred. But I knew the people there, the good people. And the idea of helping to heal the wounds, to restore some of the old values, had an appeal. I accepted. Not for the money, though it was generous, but for the principle. To prove that loyalty, decency, and human value weren't outdated concepts. My role was to remind them that a company is more than just a balance sheet, it's a community of people. My life as the quiet recruiter who merely processed applications was over. I was now the quiet voice of experience, an unlikely advocate for corporate conscience. My retirement plans were on hold, reshaped into something far more meaningful than golf. Alex Jr. thought he could cut me out and move on. He thought I was expendable. He thought my quiet dignity was a sign of weakness. He never realized that sometimes, the quietest exits leave the loudest echoes, and the most understated response can ignite a reckoning that changes everything. My 30 years of loyalty had been discarded in 30 seconds, but the consequences of those 30 seconds would ripple through Sterling Corp for years to come, a stark reminder of the cost of corporate ruthlessness. And I, the quiet man, had, against all odds, become the unexpected instrument of that change. The reckoning had arrived. For them, and for me. It was time to rebuild.